Hey kids, it's Mrs. Fravel. How are you? Welcome to week 2 of the pelagic environment. And now we're going to talk about the things that live in the open ocean. Yay! Make sure you got all of the abiotic factors assignments done. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message or jump into the Google Meet. Without further ado, let's get on to the things that live in the ocean. Today we're going to talk about plankton, and then later in the week on Wednesday or Thursday, I will post another concept on sea turtles. Yay, sea turtles. I love them. All right, without further ado, let's talk about the tiny things, the base of all of the food webs in the ocean. Let's talk about plankton. Okay, what is plankton? Technically, plankton is defined as any organism, no matter what size, that cannot swim against the current. And yes, there are big planktonic creatures, but most plankton or plankta, which is the grammatically correct plural of plankton, most of them are small or microscopic organisms that drift and float and spend their lives just as part of the open ocean current system. Okay? There's two main types of plankton. There are holoplankton and meroplankton, and I'm going to go through what both of those are right now. Let's start with holoplankton. Holoplankton is defined as organisms that spend their entire lives as plankton. That's their whole gig. They just travel the ocean on the currents, live their life cycle, reproduce, hunt, die, all of that, just as plankton. We're going to go through some of those different types. The first and most important is phytoplankton. The word part phyto indicates that it is a photosynthetic organism, like a plant. Mostly these include microscopic single-celled algae, can also include some cyanobacteria. We talk about these in two main groups, dinoflagellates and diatoms. Dinoflagellates are single-celled algae. They have a little tail or flagella. There are different kinds of them, and they actually can move around a little bit in the water back and forth, but again, they don't swim against the current. These guys have shells. They have external shells around their cell walls for a little more protection. Same with diatoms. They're just a different group of phytoplankton algae. These guys have shells made of silica and calcium, all kinds of things, and their structures are pretty rigid. Diatoms, as a group, they can be found everywhere. Not just in the ocean. They're found in freshwater. They're also found in the soil. And they are very important to the health of all ecosystems, especially the ocean. Okay. And here's just a pretty picture of some of them. Okay. What else? Zooplankton. Z-O-O, zoo. Zooplankton indicates an animal type of organism or a single-celled organism whose cellular structure is like an animal cell. Okay, so for single-celled, that includes foraminifera, and which are single-celled amoeboid protozoa. They're just tiny little weirdos. And then radiolaria, those are also shelled protozoans. And protozoans are just a kingdom of microscopic animal-like single-celled organisms. Okay? They're quite pretty. And then we also have holoplankton that are multicellular zooplankton. That means they are tiny animals, microscopic or very small animals. And these include things like rotifers, which is this little weird organism right there, and krill, which is this. They look like shrimp, and copepods and amphipods, which are these guys right here. This is an amphipod, and then this one are copepods. That looks familiar from the SpongeBob. Also, we get larger ones. Jellyfish are technically holoplankton. Jellyfish, even the giant jellyfish, which include lion's mane jellyfish, which can be as big as a school bus. They are considered to be plankton, but there are also microscopic and very small jellyfish. And then we get gastropod mollusks, and that's a fancy word. Gastropod is a group of mollusks that includes snails and slugs. So mollusks like this sea butterfly right here, those, and I believe this one, sea angels, those are gastropod mollusks that are generally pretty small and spend their whole lives as holoplankton. Okay, all right. Then the second group is meroplankton. What does that mean? Meroplankton. You know what? I'm going to pop out of here. Maybe. Yeah. Meroplankton are animals that spend just a portion of their lives as zooplankton. They usually start out in the plankton as larvae. So these are babies. Baby fish, baby jellies, baby arthropods, mollusks, and worms. And in their larval phase, they look very different from their adult phase usually. So these right here on this row in this picture, that's what an adult would look like. And when they are juvenile and larvae, they exist in the plankton and they look like this. Oh, weird. Weird. Especially these urchins and starfish have the weirdest larvae. And also larval fish. Baby fish can be rather tiny, and they will start their life out looking like these little freaks with big eyes, and they travel the world on the currents, and they eat and they get eaten. And then when they mature, all of these larval animals, when they mature, they generally will drop out of the plankton and then exist in the ecosystem where they're supposed to as an adult to reproduce and be part of the food chain there. Again, this is what some of them look like. I have linked these videos both on the page after this, and then one of those is also on your assignment to watch. They're really cool. Why do we care? Great question. Glad you asked. Plankton is exceedingly important. Okay. This little world, this microscopic mass of animals and plants and algae and viruses and bacteria and cyanobacteria, everything lives in the plankton. And as phytoplankton, the phytoplankton and other photosynthetic plankton, they produce half of the atmospheric oxygen on the planet. We always hear about how the rainforests are the lungs of the planet. No. The problem with that we've discovered is that all of the oxygen that's produced by the rainforests is used in the rainforest because of the mass of biomass of animals that live in the rainforest. They're sucking up all that oxygen. But out in the ocean, it's actually released more into the atmosphere. So even here in Utah, every other breath you take technically was produced by microscopic diatoms and dinoflagellates in the ocean. And then zooplankton are the primary consumers in the ocean food chain. They feed on phytoplankton, and then they feed everything up until we get to the apex predators, right? The largest animals on the planet, blue whales and other baleen whales, which we'll talk about next week, they eat plankton. They survive on plankton. The largest animals in the world feed exclusively on the smallest animals in the world. Okay? And then the other importance of meroplankton, especially when we talk about fish, urchins, those larval stages, they circle the globe on those currents that we talked about back in oceanography. And when they mature, they drop out of the plankton to then colonize the ecosystems that best suit them. But a fish that might be born in, that might hatch into the plankton, say in Indonesia, it might be carried across the Pacific and decide to drop out and become an adult on the coast of California or down in the Great Barrier Reef. They do have some power to vertically migrate in and out of the plankton. And when a fish or a crab or an urchin or a starfish, when their larvae is ready to mature, they will find a suitable environment, drop out of the plankton, grow up, and then start that cycle all over again. Okay. And then there's another video. I will also link that with this one. Watch all the videos, you guys. I mean, what else do you have going on right now? Okay. The importance of phytoplankton. So again, with that oceanic phytoplankton producing oxygen, we can track that using satellite maps, and those satellite maps show the presence of oceanic chlorophyll, and it changes throughout the year. Now, normally this is what it looks like. Okay? However, right now there is a couple of problems with oceanic phytoplankton. We are finding the data from satellites and the data from water samples. It looks like there are either not enough chlorophyll in the places where there should be. So this is what it should look like throughout the year. In one of your assignments, you'll be looking at normal chlorophyll maps. So this is not happening like it should be anymore. And you can watch this video on the decrease of oceanic chlorophyll. But then the other problem is that in some places, there's too much. Okay? Phytoplankton can become a toxic problem, and we call those algal blooms. So I don't know if you guys know why fertilizers work on plants, but when your parents put fertilizer on the lawn, what that does is that increases the nitrogen and phosphorus available for plants, and that's what plants use to build their sugars. That's what makes them grow. Unfortunately, all of the fertilizer that we put on our agriculture and on our lawns, when it rains or when it's watered, it runs off into first local streams and rivers. And y'all know from Nemo, where does everything end up? All water leads to the ocean, right? So the water from the land that's running off with the fertilizers in it is ending up in the ocean, feeding and overfeeding algae and phytoplankton. And we get what's called a red tide. And what happens is those algal blooms become so thick that they use up all of the resources locally in an area of water, and then they die and they settle to the bottom, and bacteria eat them, and then bacteria release toxins. And some of the dinoflagellates and diatoms in the algal blooms, they also release toxins as a byproduct. And that becomes a problem when you get this giant mass. It depletes the oxygen in the water, releases toxins, and we end up with dead zones in the ocean. And they, in the last 2 years, have become a really massive problem, especially when it's combined with when we combine the fertilizer runoff with increased temperatures. Global warming. So these organisms also like warm water, and this is just one example of a bloom off the coast of Florida. They started seeing all kinds of animals, from manatees, fish, pufferfish, all kinds of everything, birds washing up dead on the beaches from these red tides releasing toxins. It kills everything. In the Gulf of Mexico last year, the dead zone extended all the way around the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida, and parts of Texas. That's because, I don't know if you know this, there's a great big river that dumps right there, the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River runs right through the heartland of America, where we grow all of our food, where our farmers work so hard to make sure we are all fed. Unfortunately, when they fertilize their fields, the fertilizer runs off into the Mississippi River, into the Gulf of Mexico. Not good. Okay, I think that's it for today. Please go do the plankton worksheet, watch all of the videos, and if you have any questions, let me know. Talk to you soon. There will be new content up on Wednesday or Thursday with sea turtles. Okay, have a great day. Bye.